And so I kind of grew into hating being not only an immigrant myself, but like not being white. That was the thing I struggled with, actually, was not being white, which is crazy because it's like, okay, like,
All right, welcome to Live Talk. This is a podcast. And our goal is to highlight and address issues that are impacting the youth and young adults within the Ethiopian and Eritrean community. So today we're going to be talking about identity crisis. What's it like being Ethiopian, Eritrean in the United States, and what are some solutions to help those listening who are struggling with their identity? And so we have Dr. Bezalem here. We have Senit, and my name is Robel. So welcome to Live Talk. And so I'd love to ask you guys, like, what's it like being Ethiopian and Eritrean, and how have you dealt with, or have you struggled with your identity at all?
honestly, I think this is a really good topic. One, because a lot of us, or especially our parents, are immigrants here, and then some of us are also immigrants as well. So you kind of have to adapt to, especially being in a country like America where there's so many different races. The language is mostly English, whatever it is. I was born out of the country. I was born in Eritrea, and I came here when I was 4 years old. And I didn't really struggle much with my identity. I think it was kind of because I was always around people who were of my, were Eritrean, were Ethiopian. My parents were with me all the time growing up. It didn't really hit until I was in and I grew up in when I lived in Colorado, I grew up in a mostly Ethiopian and Eritrean church, even though our leaders and our pastors were Ferenc, white. But I mostly grew up around people who looked like me, even when I went to diverse schools and whatever. But I remember when I moved to Maryland about 6 years ago, that's when I kind of started struggling with my identity within okay, now I kind of, all right, I see myself as Abasha, but I also there's something else, a part of me that wants to conform to everybody else. Especially when I first moved to Maryland, I remember the first couple weeks, and then starting high school, I was more so no, there was actually one particular moment in 8th grade, I remember, and I've told this to Abigail and other people, my friends, but I remember I was it was recess and we were being called out of lunch. So lunch was ending and we were going to our classes. And I remember this girl named Mena, who I'm still friends with to this day. She asked me, she was like, "Oh, Sunny, it's are you Abasha?" Because I was new to that school. And I in my head, I was okay, I can answer yes, I can answer no. It's obvious that I'm Abasha. But I told her, I was no, I'm not. And I was thinking back, it's are you serious? It's very obvious.
You said you're not?
Yeah, I told her I'm not. Because I don't think at that time I realized that was the beginning of my identity crisis and trying to figure out who I was. Even though I knew in my head, it's obvious physically that I'm Abasha, my parents are Abasha, I speak Amarinya, Tigrinya, whatever it is. I think a part of me was still rejecting that. And so I kind of grew into hating being not only an immigrant myself, but not being white. That was the thing I struggled with, actually, was not being white, which is crazy because it's okay, why would you want to be white? But it's that's kind of the standard that's people are held to, especially when it comes to beauty standards and all these things. So that's something I struggled with. And I was just thinking about this a lot when you brought up the topic. Initially, I was okay, this is good because this is something that I've struggled with. I know my friends have struggled with. It's a topic that I've brought up during discussions over food and whatever. I think it's really important, and I'm glad that we're able to discuss this today.
Wow, that's incredible.
Amazing, interesting. Yeah, but especially here in the DMV area where there is a lot of Ethiopian Eritreans, close to 500,000, and I've moved here 4 years ago, and I've got the privilege to really spend some time with the young and the young adults. That some of them are born and raised and grown up here. Some have moved when they were very, 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 in 5 years old, 6 years, 7 years old, when they're just children. So there is a lot of struggle, because they're living in two different worlds. When they go home, they're Ethiopian, they speak Amharic. That's most of their parents might not speak English, well. And when they go out, to their schools, their friends, could be African American, white, especially those who live in a predominantly white or maybe predominantly African American, where there is now mix up. Especially those young and young adults struggle a lot with their identity. Who am I? I'm Ethiopian, Eritrean. I'm white American. African American. So this is something that really impacted our community so much. So this was speaking. How about you, Robert? How was your experience? You've been grown up here, raised here.
Yeah, you were born here, right?
Yeah, I was born here. So I grew up. By the way, this is being recorded in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Yeah.
So shout out to the DMV. For everybody in the DMV, represent. But yeah, so I grew up in Montgomery County, and it's interesting because you wanted to be white, and I wanted to be stereotypical black person. Whatever that means. And at the time where I was growing up, it was a lot of us. A lot of my Ethiopian friends were listening to hip hop and watching music videos, and like we wanted to be what we saw on TV. So that's interesting because we wanted to be like accepted by our black friends at school, pretty much. And that's always been a journey because in my home, my parents are speaking Amharic. They're trying to teach me how to speak Amharic. I didn't want to learn how to speak Amharic, but I'm in that community. I'm in that Ethiopian environment. And then when I go out to my, predominantly, black and Latino school, I'm like trying to shed everything about me that makes me different. Whether that is the way my clothes smell because of the way my mom cooks, and so it's just awkward, and so I really struggled with that. There was this one memory I had I was maybe 11, and I was with two of my friends at the time, and we're hanging out in our neighborhood. We're playing basketball, and I'm talking what I think is, normally, and then my friend says, "Why are you talking so white?"
Yeah.
He says, "Why are you talking so white?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" Like, I'm just talking. And he's like, "No, you gotta talk black, man. You gotta talk." And I'm looking at him like, "You're Ethiopian. What are you talking about?" Like, and I remember that just confused me. And I thought maybe I need to change the way I talk. Maybe I'm not doing this thing right. Maybe I'm not performing well enough. And so I remember that was the first time I felt confused. I was like, how am I supposed to act? I don't know. And so, yeah, it's been interesting.
Where I see here, growing up, as you said, in a predominantly maybe white American or maybe predominantly, African American or maybe predominantly Latinos. That's where when you are mixed and living around your own community or with a mixed type of community, some of this helps a lot, with identity. But especially when you're born here, raised here, grown ups, and some of the youth that I talk with, young guys I talk with in high school, especially, people start to feel different, start to be rejected by their friends. They grow up with, could be white American, could be African American, but when they grow up and go to high school, I don't know, maybe in college, they start to feel that sense of being rejected, not being included, not being embraced, and being told that you're not part of us. You are not one with us. So that spirit, that spirit of being excluded, feeling and believing that you are part of the community, and grown up, and some of them experience that spirit of rejection, and that's where they start to really experience this crisis of identity. So that have a lot of consequences. We can talk about the impact that this have, among the youth, the young adults, and I see a very huge impact. So we can really talk about that too. From what I see, and as I told you, I grew up, and spent most of my adult life, young and adult life, in Ethiopia. So moving here, I have already there's a well-formed identity when I moved here, but when I look at my community, especially the second, third generation, that's what hit me, where where they be impacted. That sense of being rejected, not being impressed, creating a sense of heart, and they become more and more anxious. They feel resentful toward the society. They feel resentful towards their community, toward this nation. And that has impacted their emotional status, and makes them, anxious. Even that have impacted their self-image, but also their image towards others, and creates a kind of resentment, hate, and imagine the violence. The violence also could contribute to violence. That you see in this nation, violence is increasing a lot. Yeah, you could tie that with that sense of that identity crisis, especially when there is racist or xenophobic prejudices that could worsen this too. And so the social environment too could contribute to that. So that affect their performance at school, that affect their performance in the workplace, and that affect their relationship with one another. So it's really impacting a lot of young and young adults in our community. You might have seen that too, no? Yeah.